Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Xi Jinping is on a mission to woo Africa. He's making tall promises, $51 billion in investments, 1 million jobs. What's in it for him? Why is he hosting dozens of African leaders in China's biggest post-pandemic event? How should the rest of the world see it? We'll discuss all of this. Meanwhile, halfway across the world, Justin Trudeau has been dumped by his Khalistani friend, Jagmeet Singh. What caused the breakup and will it bring down the government? We'll bring you the full story. In the US, no end to gun terror. Another school shooting leaves 4 people dead. The suspect, a 14-year-old student, will be tried as an adult. In Singapore, a grand welcome for Prime Minister Modi. We'll discuss India's Act East policy. Washington is back to its old games, blaming Russia today for election meddling. We look at the intensifying media wars and how narratives are weaponized in our world. Why Joe Biden is trying to block a steel deal, citing national security risks. Why India's market regulator is in the headlines for the wrong reasons with protests at the Sebi headquarters. What Bangladesh's caretaker leader has said about Sheikh Hasina's presence in India. In our continuing campaign, Safety is Her Right, a story from Uganda, where an Olympian athlete has died after being set on fire by her boyfriend. And on the occasion of Teachers' Day, we talk about what makes a great teacher. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. French President Emmanuel Macron finally picks a prime minister, names Michel Barnier as the new prime minister after months of political deadlock. Barnier is the European Union's former Brexit negotiator. The 73-year-old right-wing leader is the oldest premier in the history of modern France. The first delivery of Mpox vaccines arrives in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Almost 100,000 doses have reached the Central African country. DR Congo is at the epicenter of the Mpox outbreak. Last month, the World Health Organization declared Mpox a global public health emergency. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken heads to Haiti. He is the highest-ranking American official to travel there since 2015. Criminal gangs have taken over much of the poor Caribbean nation. An international security force led by Kenya is aiming to restore order in Haiti. The United Arab Emirates completes the Arab world's first nuclear power plant. The plant will generate 25% of the electricity needs of the Gulf state. The UAE says its nuclear ambitions are for peaceful purposes. It has ruled out any enrichment program or nuclear reprocessing technologies. And China braces for Super Typhoon Yagi. Schools suspended and many flights cancelled in the southern part of the country. The typhoon is expected to make landfall on Friday afternoon. Hong Kong has also issued its third highest typhoon warning. "51 African leaders are in China. They've been there for 3 days now for the China-Africa Summit. Beijing is hosting it. It's their biggest diplomatic event since the pandemic, also very significant for Chinese diplomacy and economy. You see, China's Africa strategy is or has been under scrutiny. Xi Jinping is trying to turn things around, and today he made some big promises.
In the next 3 years, the Chinese government is willing to provide 360 billion yuan of financial support.
51 billion in financial support. This will be spread over 3 years. The money will come in the form of loans, aid and investment. And that's not all. Xi Jinping also promised 1 million jobs to the continent, 1 million jobs for Africa. How will China generate these jobs? through a range of development projects. 30 projects will focus on infrastructure and connectivity. China will also fund 1,000 small projects. Plus, it will give Africa more military assistance, both financial aid and training. A $140 million military aid package was announced. China will train 6,000 military personnel in the region and 1,000 police officers. So plenty of announcements. But what's the thinking behind them? Broadly, China is trying to achieve two goals here. First, gain influence in the global south, and second, boost the Chinese economy. That's what they're trying to do. Let's talk about the influence strategy first. Africa is an important part of this plan. It is one of the biggest players in the global south. The continent has 54 countries. There are 54 countries in Africa. Leaders from 51 of these countries are attending the summit in China. And Beijing is going to town with it. Let me show you a headline published by Xinhua. That's the Chinese state mouthpiece. This article talks about the Africa summit. It says the event, and I'm quoting, the event illustrates China's vision and aspirations for the global south. Africa could be China's ticket to global south leadership. So Xi Jinping is going all out, trying to win over these African leaders. He is presenting himself as an all-weather friend of Africa.
I propose that bilateral relations between China and all African countries having diplomatic ties with China be elevated to the level of strategic relations, and that the overall characterization of China-Africa relations be elevated to an all-weather China-Africa community with a shared future for the new era.
A strategic partnership. That's Xi Jinping's promise to Africa. Now let's talk about his second goal, which is tied to the Chinese economy. China is Africa's largest trading partner. Africa is a big market for Chinese goods, and Beijing cannot afford to lose ground there, especially now when the Chinese economy is slowing. And the Western market is slipping from their grasp. The West is placing trade barriers on Chinese goods, so for Chinese producers, the global market is basically shrinking. And that makes Africa even more important for them. They cannot afford to lose ground here. But this trade relationship is one-sided, heavily skewed in Beijing's favor. The trade surplus stands at $64 billion. $64 billion in China's favor. Cyril Ramaphosa raised this today during the summit. He's the president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa. He wants Beijing to address the trade imbalance. He said, and I'm quoting, "We would like to narrow the trade deficit and address the structure of our trade." Beijing responded to this. It struck a deal with South Africa. China will buy more raw wool and dairy products from South Africa. So how much money will China set aside for this? Has it made any commitments on financing or investment? Well, we don't know because they did not share the specifics. In fact, that was the case with most African nations. Big promises, but not many details. China was also non-committal on debt relief, an issue that the African Union raised today.
For many African states, debt relief is an urgent imperative to give debtor countries economies a vital economic breathing space. It is also desirable that, in the context of our industrialization effort, the portfolio of private investments in Africa should be sufficiently diversified to extend beyond the traditional field of mining and energy resources.
African leaders want China to do more. They want more loans, more financing, they want debt relief for struggling nations, and they want bigger investments. And on all these fronts, Beijing has disappointed them. Xi Jinping's $51 billion pledge makes for a great headline, but it is far less than what China has committed in the past. In fact, over the years, Beijing has gradually reduced its financial commitments to Africa. Between 2000 and 2020, Chinese lending to Africa increased five-fold over 20 years. It touched a whopping $696 billion. Chinese lending to Africa, $696 billion. Today, Beijing has committed just $51 billion, and that too over a period of 3 years. So why the fall in lending? Well, one reason is the state of the Chinese economy. It is weak. It can no longer support massive projects. Even Xi Jinping realizes this. So now he's talking about what he calls small and beautiful schemes. That's how he put it, small and beautiful schemes. Clearly, China's checkbooks also run out at some point. So they're changing tack and scaling back. Instead of big-ticket projects, Xi Jinping is focusing on smaller initiatives. Another factor is the rising debt levels in African nations. They're buried under debt. In 2020, Zambia defaulted on its debt. China was Zambia's biggest creditor. It owes around $6 billion to Chinese lenders. Ghana and Angola have also faced financial distress due to Chinese loans. And this has raised global concerns. The United Nations Secretary General was at the summit today in China. He raised the rising debt levels in Africa. He said, and I'm quoting, "The situation is unsustainable." So far, Beijing has mostly restructured loans. They've refused the demand for large-scale waivers. This summit was a great opportunity to change course. But that was not to be. China wants to do business with Africa, but strictly on its own terms and for its own gains. Let's turn to Canada now, where the headline is betrayal. That too of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. I wish I could call it surprising, but frankly, it is not, because Trudeau trusted the wrong person. Canada's Khalistan mascot, Jagmeet Singh. He leads the NDP, or the New Democratic Party in Canada, NDP, and they have decided to dump Trudeau. Let me explain. Canada's parliament has 338 seats. You need 170 seats to get a majority and form a government, 170. But Justin Trudeau's Liberal Party only has 154 seats. So where did the rest come from? Jagmeet's party, NDP, they have 24 lawmakers in parliament, and they agreed to support Justin Trudeau's party, not coalition support, outside support. Trudeau would keep all cabinet positions and ministries, but if a confidence vote was called, Jagmeet would support him. That was the arrangement. In return, Jagmeet got policy help. Trudeau pushed some of Jagmeet's pet projects, for example, Khalistan. Just think of everything that Justin Trudeau did. He cozied up to designated terrorists, publicly accused India of murder, defended separatism as free speech, and gave a safe haven to Khalistanis on the run. Well, congratulations, Prime Minister. It was all for nothing because Jagmeet Singh dumped you anyway. And his excuse? Apparently, Trudeau wasn't brave enough.
Justin Trudeau has proven again and again he will always cave to corporate greed. The Liberals have let people down. They don't deserve another chance. The fact is, the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests to fight for people.
Here in India, we've seen a lot of coalition politics. We've seen alliances being built. We've also seen alliances collapse. So we know a made-up excuse when we hear it. And what you just heard was a classic example. The truth is, Jagmeet Singh is abandoning a sinking ship. He has revealed himself to be an opportunist. He's leaving Trudeau because the Prime Minister is losing. Look at the opinion polls. The opposition Conservatives lead Trudeau's party, that too by almost 18 points. And so chances are Trudeau is on his way out and Jagmeet Singh is jumping overboard while he still can. The question is, what happens to Trudeau's government? Will he be ousted? Well, not automatically. You need a confidence vote to topple the government. Any lawmaker can propose such a vote. All budget bills are also considered as confidence votes. If Justin Trudeau loses any of them, he will be out and elections will have to be held. On paper, polls are slated for October 2025, October next year, but Trudeau may not make it till then. He could be ousted this month or next month or maybe next year. It depends on whether he can get new allies. But Trudeau is downplaying all the coalition concerns. He says he will let others focus on the politics.
Look forward to conversations with Mr. Singh about how we're going to continue to demonstrate that confident countries invest in their citizens, invest in their future, because that's what we're doing. I am not focused on politics. I'll let other parties focus on politics. I'm focused on actually delivering the things that Canadians told me this summer they need.
Now, here's the obvious question. Canada's parliament will convene this month. Why doesn't the opposition just table a no-confidence motion? Well, chances are they will, but it's not guaranteed to succeed. You see, Jagmeet Singh may have scrapped his deal with Justin Trudeau, but he can still prop up the government. And why would he do that? A, because he's not ready for elections. Reports say his party hasn't raised enough funds. And B, to build distance. Jagmeet will want to distance himself from Trudeau's policies, but for that he needs some time. He needs to let the divorce sink in. And the opposition realizes this. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is calling it a stunt.
And now, sellout Singh has pulled a stunt. The sellout Singh stunt today, where he came out and claimed that he was wrong, that the coalition was a bad, costly idea, but he refuses to commit to voting for a carbon tax election.
So things are precarious right now. Trudeau could reach out to other political parties, other opposition parties, like the Bloc Québécois, who have 32 seats. Or he could reach out to Jagmeet again, convince him to not topple the government. But either way, two things are pretty clear. One, Justin Trudeau is now a lame duck leader. He is at the mercy of smaller parties. And two, Jagmeet Singh is running his party to the ground. He took charge of the NDP in 2017. Look at their performance before and after. In 2011, the NDP had 103 seats. 2011, 103 seats. In 2015, they won 44 seats. In 2019, they won 24 seats, and in 2021, 24 seats again. This is Jagmeet Singh's career. He can barely keep his party afloat. And this is the guy who wants to break up India. It certainly promises to be an interesting period in Canadian politics. Maybe a good idea to get a lettuce for Justin Trudeau. Like Liz Truss in Britain, let's see if he can outlive it. Now let's turn south to the US, to the state of Georgia. A tragedy has taken place there, one that is all too common in America. There was a mass shooting at a school. 4 people were killed, 2 children, 2 adults, 2 students and 2 teachers. They were gunned down by a boy who went to the school. The local police responded to calls for help, but 4 people had already been killed by the time they arrived. And the shooter surrendered when he encountered them.
As the sheriff mentioned earlier this morning, the shooter is in custody. His name is Colt, that's C-O-L-T, Gray. He is a 14-year-old student here at the high school. Again, he has been taken into custody. He will be charged with murder, and he will be tried as an adult and handled as an adult.
The shooter was 14 years old. He managed to get his hands on an AR platform-style weapon, a semi-automatic rifle. This despite being on the police's watch list. Reports say that the suspect was on the FBI's radar last year, America's much-wanted Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI. The suspect had made some threatening posts on an online gaming site. He'd warned of a school shooting at an unidentified location and time. He'd even posted pictures of some guns. So the feds had tipped off local law enforcement, and a nearby sheriff's office interviewed the suspect. All of this happened last year, when he was still 13 years old. At the time, the boy denied making those threats. His father owned some guns, but insisted that the boy did not have unsupervised access to those guns. So the police could not detain him. The authorities reportedly issued a warning to the schools in the area. The suspect was supposed to be monitored. But clearly, this did not work. He ended up killing 4 people, then surrendered to the police. He will be tried as an adult, but that won't bring the victims back. It won't change the fact that this was a massive security failure, and it won't change the situation in America. Guns are the leading cause of deaths for American children and teens. Every year, thousands of children are killed by firearms. The trend has only been rising. In 2021, more than 2,500 children died in firearm-related incidents. More than 2,500 children. School shootings are a part of this. Dozens of children have been killed at school over the last few years. At school, it's supposed to be the safest place for children outside their homes. But in the US, they are the sites of massacres. After a certain point, you have to start wondering, does the US even care about its children? It's supposed to be a superpower, the leader of the free world. So how is it that children are not safe in American schools? There will always be a bunch of excuses and the endless politics.
But this is just a senseless tragedy. on top of so many senseless tragedies. And it's just outrageous that every day in our country, in the United States of America, that parents have to send their children to school worried about whether or not their child will come home alive. It's senseless. It is. We've got to stop it. And we have to end this epidemic of gun violence in our country once and for all.
Have to end it, she says. Okay, so do it. She's been serving as the vice president for almost 4 years now. How much time does it take to stop school shootings? The Democrats complain that their hands are tied, that the Republicans won't let them fix the problem. The Republicans are gun buffs. Perhaps this kind of collateral damage is fine for them. Either way, the US has no solutions. It cannot stop gun violence. It cannot stop school shootings. It cannot get its act together. By now, this has become common knowledge. Yet the Americans seem to be blind to this reality as they poke their nose into everyone else's business. Washington will declare other countries dangerous for their citizens and issue travel advisories. Their ambassadors will keep dishing out sermons and policy prescriptions about public safety and human rights. All this without so much as batting an eyelid, as if completely oblivious to what goes on at home. The truth is, it's the US that's an unsafe country now, the most dangerous developed nation in the world. It needs to set its house in order before preaching to the rest. To Singapore now. It was a busy day for Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi there. He met his Singaporean counterpart, he held meetings, toured a semiconductor factory, interacted with business leaders, and even addressed a round table. This was Prime Minister Modi's first visit to Singapore since 2018, and all in all, it was quite a successful trip. India and Singapore have upgraded their bilateral ties. It is now a comprehensive strategic partnership. The two nations also signed 4 MOUs, Memorandums of Understanding, with the main focus being on semiconductor manufacturing. Singapore is already India's largest trade partner in ASEAN. Our next report tells you how it could be a crucial partner in helping India realize its chip-making dreams.
On Wednesday, PM Modi landed in Singapore. He got a warm welcome. He was received by the diaspora amid dance and music. After that, the Indian Prime Minister headed to the Istana. It's the official residence of the Singapore Prime Minister. And this is where PM Lawrence Wong hosted a private dinner for him. Today, it was down to business for the Indian PM. In the morning, PM Modi arrived at Singapore's Parliament House. He was greeted by PM Lawrence Wong. He received a ceremonial welcome. He met ministers and delegates. And finally, it was time for bilateral talks. The meeting was a productive one. India and Singapore have long shared bilateral relations. But this time, they decided to elevate those ties. It is now a strategic, comprehensive partnership. The aim is to boost economic ties and collaboration in various sectors. The two countries also signed 4 MOUs, that's Memorandums of Understanding. PM Modi also announced that India's first Thiruvalluvar Cultural Centre would soon open in Singapore.
हम भी भारत में अनेकों सिंगापुर बनाना चाहते हैं और मुझे खुशी है कि हम इस दिशा में मिलकर प्रयास कर रहे हैं। हमारे बीच जो मिनिस्टरियल राउंड टेबल बनी है वो एक पाथ ब्रेकिंग मैकेनिज्म है। स्किलिंग, डिजिटलाइजेशन, मोबिलिटी, एडवांस मैन्युफैक्चरिंग जैसे सेमीकंडक्टर और एआई हेल्थ केयर, सस्टेनेबिलिटी और साइबर सिक्योरिटी जैसे क्षेत्रों में सहयोग की दिशा में ये इनिशिएटिव की पहचान बन गई है।
So, what are these MOUs about? One of them focuses on digital security. It aims to enhance cooperation in cybersecurity and new age technologies like artificial intelligence. It also aims to facilitate upskilling of workers. 2 others focus on health and skilling. But the most important one focuses on semiconductors, also known as chips. India and Singapore will create a semiconductor ecosystem. They will collaborate on development, they will nurture talent in designing and manufacturing, and Singaporean companies will invest in India. This is crucial because Singapore is a semiconductor hub. It makes 10% of the world's chips and 20% of the semiconductor making equipment. 9 of the top 15 global semiconductor firms have a presence in Singapore. This includes Qualcomm, AMD, Applied Materials, and Micron. India wants to become a key player in the global chip supply chain, which makes this partnership very crucial. And it didn't just stop with an MOU. PM Modi visited AEM Holdings, a leading chip manufacturing unit in Singapore. Modi also met top business leaders. This included the CEOs of Blackstone Singapore, Temasek Holdings, Sembcorp Industries Limited, Capital Land Investment, and Singapore Airways, among others. These business leaders have pledged to invest in India. So the visit focused on 3 aspects: upgrading ties, boosting investments, and focusing on semiconductor production. Shows you how important Singapore is for India and how it acts as a critical partner in PM Modi's Look East policy.
Hello, welcome. You're watching RT International.
As alleged in our court filings, President Vladimir Putin's inner circle, including Sergei, directed Russian public relations companies to influence the 2024 U.S. presidential election.
Трудно сказать.
America is back to its favorite pastime, and I don't mean baseball, I mean obsessing over Russia. Their latest target is RT, Russia Today, a Kremlin-funded Russian broadcaster. Washington says RT is meddling in the US election. How? By using influencers. Apparently, RT had hired a firm in Tennessee. They paid this firm $10 million. To do what? Create content based on Russian messaging. And here's how it worked. The Tennessee firm contracted a number of right-wing influencers. They were paid to make content on certain topics like migrant gangs or transgender issues or online censorship. These are staple topics for American conservatives. Nearly 2,000 such videos were created and they amassed 16 million views. Now, the obvious question is why? How does all of this help Russia? Listen to what the US Attorney General said.
The subject matter and content of many of the videos published by the company were often consistent with Russia's interest in amplifying U.S. domestic divisions in order to weaken U.S. opposition to core Russian interests, particularly its ongoing war in Ukraine. An internal planning document created by the Kremlin states that as a goal of the campaign is securing Russia's preferred outcome in the election.
So 2 things. 1, Russia wanted to amplify divisions in the US. And 2, Russia has a preferred outcome in the election. And what is that? A Donald Trump victory. We are not saying this, American officials are, that Russia wants Trump to win. They are cracking down heavily on Russia today. 10 people have been sanctioned by Washington. Among them is RT's editor-in-chief. 2 RT staffers have also been indicted, meaning they face criminal charges in the US. But RT has denied these allegations and they're responding in the most RT way. Listen to this. 2016 called and it wants its cliches back. 3 things are certain in life: death, taxes, and RT's interference in the US elections. Sounds funny, right? But there's a bigger issue here. That of information warfare. Russia Today is a state-funded broadcaster, basically a mouthpiece for Moscow. And they rarely hide it. In 2017, RT registered as a foreign agent in the US. Technically, news channels don't have to do that, but RT did, because it was not just a news channel. It was also a political agent. Which brings us to the problem. There's a line between journalism and propaganda. There's also a line between propaganda and meddling. Washington says RT crossed all of these lines. But they're not the first or the only ones. Governments have always used media to push their narrative. Consider the United States and the Iraq War. Most US publications supported the war, like the New York Times and the Washington Post. They blindly bought the US government's version of events. Later on, they apologized for it. I'm sure Iraqis would call this propaganda. Same in the Libya war. The New York Times has been accused of favoring an intervention. Well, the US did intervene, and today Libya is a broken country. Such practices are more common among state-funded outlets like Al Jazeera in Qatar. They've been accused of spreading propaganda too during the Arab Spring and during the blockade of Qatar. So this problem is not exactly new. The only difference is Russia today went a step ahead. And frankly, it's harder for non-Western outlets because the standards are different. When a CNN or New York Times pushes the US narrative, it's good journalism. When others do it, it's called propaganda. And I don't mean just government narratives, I mean national interest narratives. Clearly, the Americans have aced this game. They've disguised propaganda as journalism. And all countries need to realize this, to wake up to this, because conflicts are not just fought with fighter jets and bullets, they're fought with information and narratives. If you can't get your narrative out, you will fail. It doesn't matter if your cause is good. And the opposite is also true. Even if your cause is bad, narratives can make it look good. That's what the US did in Iraq. That's what Russia is trying to do in Ukraine. Chances are Moscow will retaliate against the US, possibly against American media outlets. Meanwhile, President Putin is covering his tracks. US officials have accused him of covertly backing Trump. So Putin says he wants Kamala Harris to win.
I've said that our so-to-say favorite was the acting president, Mr. Biden. He's been taken out the race, but he advised all his supporters to support Mrs. Harris. That's what we'll do. We'll support her as well. That's the first thing. Secondly, her laugh is so expressive and infectious. That means that she's doing well.
Is that a joke or more propaganda? Only Putin knows. But either way, expect the media wars to escalate. China too has entered the fray. Their strategy is to throw money at the problem. Some $6.6 billion since 2009. That's the kind of money China has spent to expand its global media footprint. It's an information race. India, unfortunately, is falling behind. And the cost of this could be immense. We say the key is to find a balance to spread India's interests without meddling. Our next story is also from the US. President Joe Biden is reportedly set to make a power move. He's going to wade into a political controversy and try to make a play for votes. The controversy involves two steel companies, America's US Steel and Japan's Nippon Steel. US Steel is an institution. It was America's first billion-dollar company. It once dominated the American steel industry, but in recent years, it lost its edge, falling down the global pecking order. So last year, US Steel started looking for a buyer and settled on Japan's Nippon Steel. But this started a political firestorm. It was seen as America capitulating, handing over a prized asset to the Japanese. The ground reality did not matter. It became a matter of pride. So Joe Biden is now planning to block the deal, apparently citing national security risks. Here's our report.
I believe in American steel companies. American-owned and operated steel companies.
Upon taking office, I will invoke the Defense Production Act wherever it is necessary to very quickly ramp up capacity of essential products, and I will stop Japan from buying United States steel.
U.S. Steel is an historic American company, and it is vital for our nation to maintain strong American steel companies. And I couldn't agree more with President Biden. U.S. Steel should remain American-owned and American-operated.
There's finally something all American politicians seem to agree on. That U.S. steel cannot be sold, not even to staunch allies like the Japanese. Japan's Nippon Steel is inches away from completing the takeover. It had announced its plans to buy US Steel last December. it overcame a number of regulatory hurdles. But it hasn't managed to clear the biggest hurdle: American politics. Ever since Nippon Steel set its sights on US Steel, it has been facing pushback from Joe Biden and the Democrats. Under him, the US Justice Department opened an antitrust investigation into the merger, even though the company itself had no problem with the takeover. US Steel shareholders overwhelmingly wanted to go ahead with the deal. They believed that the takeover could breathe new life into the company, open the gates to investments at its existing plants, and revitalize the grand old behemoth. But despite this, you have the politicians getting in the way, because it's not about business anymore. No politician wants to be seen as giving away an American legacy, not even to the Japanese, who are quite annoyed with all the interference. But the US is an essential ally, so they're keeping their mouths shut and waiting to see how it unfolds. But they may be in for some disappointment, because Biden looks set to go for the kill switch. He may declare the takeover a national security risk. But the real risk is not security, it's political. Because you see, the workers at US Steel are unionized. They're part of the United Steelworkers Union, which claims to be almost 800,000 strong. A lot of union members will be voting in November.
Are you ready to elect Kamala Harris our next president of the United States?
US Steel is based in the state of Pennsylvania, which is a crucial swing state. So angering these union members is not an option. Both the Democrats and the Republicans are vying for their vote, which is why you saw Trump and Biden and Harris all agreeing on the same thing. They all believe that stopping the Nippon Steel-US Steel merger will get them votes. And it actually might. But this reeks of hypocrisy. This is supposed to be America, land of the free, or rather the free market. So how is it okay for politicians to undermine a company's shareholders? Whatever happened to the great capitalist dream, where only market forces dictated which companies lived or died? It's a classic case of American double standards. American governments of all hues will berate the world, criticize any interventionism, or so-called unfair market practices. But when it's the Oval Office on the line, suddenly government overreach isn't a problem. Free market forces be damned.
I'm heading to national security right now.
They say when it rains, it pours. Ask India's market regulator Sebi and its boss Madhuri Puri Butch. They've been at the receiving end. Sebi is the Securities and Exchange Board of India, headquartered in Mumbai. The pictures you just saw are from their Mumbai office. Sebi employees held a protest today against their chairperson. They want her to step down. She's been caught in controversies for weeks now. A few days back, a new report was out. It made serious allegations against Butch. It said Sebi employees are unhappy with her leadership and that under her, the work culture has become toxic. Employees say shouting and screaming is now common and public humiliation is the norm during meetings. Last month, they lodged a formal complaint. Sebi employees wrote to the Finance Ministry. Now, Sebi is an autonomous body, but it falls under India's Finance Ministry. So, Sebi's leadership reports to the government. The Sebi chief is appointed by the Union Cabinet. They can also be removed by the Cabinet. So, what did these employees say in their complaint? Sebi's leadership uses harsh and unprofessional language. Employees have been assigned unrealistic work targets, and their movements are monitored down to the minute, and fear has become a driving force. This is what they wrote to the Finance Ministry. The Sebi leadership then responded. They issued a statement yesterday, and they said that employees, and I'm quoting, employees are being misguided by external elements. Now, this statement infuriated the employees. Hence the protest today. Around 200 employees assembled outside the Sebi building. The protest lasted for 2 hours. After that, they went back to work. But the situation is far from diffused. Let me show you some messages that are being circulated and shared. Listen to this, and I'm quoting. The protest is for the purpose of showing dissent and unity against the arm-twisting exercise done by the top management in the garb of a press release. The immediate demand is withdrawal of press release and resigning of Sebi chairperson for spreading lies against Sebi employees. So there is anger, and the anger is being directed at the Sebi chief, Madhabi Puri Butch. And the timing could not have been worse for her. She's been under the lens for some time now. It all began in the month of August when an American short seller published a report. I'm talking about Hindenburg. It's an investment research firm. It is known for targeting companies. It bets on their share prices to fall and makes money off it. That's what a short seller is. Now, Hindenburg did this with the Adani Group in India. It triggered quite a storm. Then India's market regulator Sebi started an investigation on Hindenburg. Last month, Hindenburg came out with a new report. It said Sebi chief Butch has a conflict of interest over Adani. It said Butch and her husband had stakes in offshore entities linked to Adani. Both Butch and Adani have denied these claims. Then a few days ago, fresh allegations emerged. They were levelled by India's main opposition party, the Congress Party. And they center around Butch's tenure at the ICICI Bank. She was a banker before joining Sebi. The Congress Party says she got payments from ICICI Bank while also serving at Sebi. Again, both Butch and Sebi have denied this. But these stories have taken a life of their own. And questions surrounding Madhabi Puri Butch refuse to go away. Conflict of interest is a serious charge for the chief of India's market regulator. Plus, there's politics at play. The last thing she needed was this row. The story is only developing. We'll be tracking it for you. Let's turn to Bangladesh now. The chorus for extraditing Sheikh Hasina is growing. Student leaders have talked about it, political parties have, and now interim leader Mohammad Yunus has joined in. He too wants Sheikh Hasina to return to face justice in Bangladesh.
She has to be brought back, or the people of Bangladesh won't be at peace. The kind of atrocities she has committed must be addressed through a trial here.
Now, this is very important. Until now, Hasina's extradition was only a public demand. It was not Dhaka's official position. But now it is. Mohammad Yunus says Bangladesh will not be at peace until Hasina returns, until she's tried in court. It's only a question of when the request is made. And this puts India in a tough position. Sheikh Hasina is yet to get asylum in another country. So if Dhaka makes this request to extradite Sheikh Hasina, India will have to take a call. Either reject, agree or delay. Until then, Yunus has some advice. He says Sheikh Hasina must stay silent as long as she is in India. Remember, Hasina had released a statement last month. She called for a protest march on the 15th of August. Yunus has called it an unfriendly gesture. He says such statements do not help India or Bangladesh. He also talked about the attack on Hindus. Yunus says the attacks are not religious. He says they are political. Most Hindus in Bangladesh supported Hasina, hence the mobs targeted them. That's what Yunus is saying, but I'm afraid that simply doesn't cut it. Mohammad Yunus was brought in to normalize the situation, to ensure law and order, not to make excuses for the radical mob. Apparently, he gave the same assessment to Prime Minister Modi, that the violence was political, not religious. That's what he said. And now he's given another piece of advice. Yunus wants India to rethink its position on Bangladesh.
The narrative is that everybody is Islamist, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party is Islamist, and everyone else is Islamist and will make this country into Afghanistan. And Bangladesh is in safe hands with Sheikh Hasina at the helm only. India is captivated by this narrative. India needs to come out of this.
Now, don't look at these comments in isolation. They're part of a larger shift. The attack on Hindus, the erasure of the 1971 legacy, the outreach to China and Pakistan, The blame game over floods, the decision to visit the United States before India, and the decision to leverage Hasina's stay in New Delhi to use it as a pressure tool, all of this signals a strain in bilateral ties, and Mohammad Yunus is not even hiding it. He says India-Bangladesh relations are at a low. It shows at the border too. India and Bangladesh share a 4,000-kilometer border. The interim government has adopted a new border stance, a stricter one. Dhaka says Sheikh Hasina mismanaged the border, that she asked the border agency to turn their backs, basically ignore whatever the Indian side was doing. The interim regime says that won't happen anymore. Consider what happened last month. Dhaka says Indian officials tried to erect a barbed wire along the border. Apparently, the Bangladeshis stopped the Indian attempt. But New Delhi is telling a very different story. Here, officials say that the barbed wire was meant for a cattle fence, not the border. Do you see the problem here? There's a clear trust deficit between the two sides, whether it's between the leadership or at the border. The only solution is dialogue. A Bangladeshi border delegation is visiting India next month. Hopefully, that will sort out the border. The rest of it needs political engagement. Both Prime Minister Modi and Mohammad Yunus are traveling to New York this month. They will be addressing the UN General Assembly. Perhaps they can meet on the sidelines. But at the end of the day, it's all about political will. India has respected the churn in Bangladesh. India has not meddled in or criticized their internal affairs. Why? Because New Delhi wants to keep this relationship intact. The question is, does Yunus want the same? His words suggest the opposite. Let's hope his actions tell a different story. Our next story is about Rebecca Cheptegei. She was a Ugandan Olympian. Last month, she took part in her first Olympics, and she could have had many more accolades. But last Sunday, that dream was snuffed out. She had an argument with her boyfriend. He poured petrol on her. He set her on fire. 4 days later, Rebecca succumbed to her injuries. It's a haunting realization. No matter how fast women run, the threat of violence always catches up. Rebecca trained her entire life to defy limits. She represented her country at the global stage. This isn't how her story should have ended. But it has. Like countless women across the globe who face domestic violence. Our next report takes a look at Rebecca's story.
Last month, Rebecca Cheptegei was at the Olympics. A marathon runner from Uganda, she was running for glory in Paris. Yet, just weeks later, her life has run out. Today, she died. 4 days ago, her boyfriend set her on fire. The incident took place last Sunday in Kenya. Reports suggest the couple was heard quarrelling outside. The argument is said to be about their house, one that Rebecca owned. That's when her partner bought a container of petrol. He poured it on her, he set her on fire. Her daughter tried to come for her rescue, but the boyfriend kicked her away. Rebecca was then taken to a hospital. Her body was 80% burnt and her organs were failing. So, after 4 days, she succumbed to her injuries. Her boyfriend was arrested after the incident and he too is in the hospital after suffering burns. Rebecca began her career in 2010. She represented Uganda in many races. The Paris Games was her first Olympic experience. She took part in the marathon and finished 44th in the race. Uganda's sports minister called her death tragic. Authorities are investigating the circumstances of Rebecca's death. But this isn't the first such incident. Rebecca lived in Kenya's western town of Endebess. This was to be close to the training facilities. That makes her the third female athlete to be killed in Kenya since 2021. In 2021, record-breaking Kenyan runner Agnes Tirop was stabbed to death. She was just 25 years old. Her husband is on trial for the murder. Then again in 2022, Kenyan-born athlete Damaris Mutua was found dead in Iten. That makes Rebecca's death the third such case and shines a spotlight on what female athletes go through.
I can say we are still in shock and we are in pain, especially as athletes. And this thing happening in Kenya, this is the second time an athlete is being attacked. You remember the case of Agnes Tirop. Now it has come to Rebecca. So we are not happy.
We need to, as much as possible, to speak about gender-based violence and coach our people, talk to them, sensitize about the gender-based violence, and out of that probably we'll get a good society going forward.
These are women whose strides are larger than life. Yet they still can't outrun the shadows of violence. This isn't just about the loss of a talented athlete, it's also a chilling realization that even at the pinnacle of success, women remain vulnerable to violence. The stadiums may be full of crowds, the medals may glitter. Yet, behind closed doors, women face a reality that no gold medal can erase. Rebecca Cheptegei should have been remembered for her track records. Instead, she will be remembered for the fire that took her life, like the countless other women whose lives were cut short by violence.
For our last story tonight, we have a question for you. What makes a great teacher? We ask because today is Teachers' Day in India. Goes without saying, our teachers shape us in innumerable ways. So today is a celebration in their honor to recognize their contribution, their warranted anger, and their infinite care. So let's go back to our question. Who is a great teacher? The answer may seem obvious to you, but researchers have struggled with it for centuries. The earliest accounts go as far back as 500 BC, when Confucius was portrayed as a model teacher. Many thinkers believe that good teaching is like magic. It is instinctive. Either you are a good teacher or you aren't. Obviously, it's not that simple. So education scientists generated a sea of data. They launched many quests to look for that one essential trait. And first, they focused on qualifications, like high scores or clearing teacher certification exams at the first shot. A teacher's quality can be defined by how well they did when they were students themselves. Many countries, in fact, still follow this thinking, including those with high-performing school systems like South Korea, where they recruit teacher trainees from the top 5%, or Finland from the top 10%. But this is not the complete picture. Recent research says qualification does not always make a good teacher. When you're stuck on a school bus with 40 screaming children, no one cares if you went to Harvard University. What matters is your personality. So scientists dug deeper. They looked at personality traits, extroversion, politeness, calmness, enthusiasm, and so on. And they realized that it's not just about traits either. Different teachers can be effective in different ways. A super strict teacher demands focus. A carefree teacher turns a classroom into a playground of learning. So what makes a good teacher is not about magic, top degrees, or inherent qualities. Experts say two things define a good teacher. First is skills, like the quality of instruction and subject knowledge. And the second is experience, because teachers too learn on the job like everyone else. So like with most other jobs, skills and experience shape good teaching. But there's a third factor as well, which cannot really be quantified, but it's shared by most great teachers, and that is emotion. A great teacher is one who fosters an emotional connect with students, which may be surprising because we try to keep reason and emotion separate. We tell doctors to not get attached to patients or teachers to dispassionately cover lesson plans, but science shows that emotion is not the opposite of reason. It is in fact essential to learning because emotions can make things valuable. They tell you what to pay attention to, what to care about, what to remember, which is why when you love and respect your math teacher, you fall in love with math. If you want to be like your literature teacher when you grow up, you want to read more books. There is a connection between emotional relationships and learning. And there is no one way to build it. So if you're a teacher, we see you and we thank you for everything that you do, and we hope you don't run yourself ragged trying to meet some magic criteria, because there are none. And to everyone watching this, think of a teacher who impacted you in some way. What is it that made them special? Was it their funny stories, their passion? Or was it when they showed that they care? Big or small, we hope you let them know that what makes your teacher human is also what makes them great. Our joke of the day today is about love. Finding the right one is not an easy task, but a Brazilian woman took it to the next level. She decided to marry the person she knew best, herself. I'm not kidding. She married her own self. After all, it was a match made in the mirror. But like all fairy tales, reality set in soon. The honeymoon period was short-lived. Sure, she enjoyed the solo trips and the quiet dinners at home, but turns out it wasn't so easy. Also, what do you do when you need space from yourself? Soon, romance turned into resentment, and now she's divorcing herself. The worst part about this? She will run into her ex every time she looks into the mirror, and she cannot say, "It's not you, it's me," because it's literally just her. Now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Pope Francis leads Mass for over 80,000 people in Indonesia. Floodwaters burst through a library wall in New York, leading to damages worth $10 million. And firefighters battle a fast-spreading wildfire in northwestern Spain. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1972, the Munich Olympics took a tragic turn. Palestinian gunmen attacked the Israeli team, taking them hostage. 11 people were killed after a botched rescue operation. The attack caused a deep rift between Germany and Israel. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Across continents, one powerful news source.
bringing you diverse perspectives on the issues that matter.
We go beyond the boundaries to give you that little extra about every sporting moment.
So thank you for making Firstpost 5 million strong. We're counting on your support, and you can trust us to bring you the news unfiltered and unvarnished.
Climate change is on our doorstep. It's time for a revolution to take root. And it starts with 1.4 billion Indians. It starts with one tree for humanity, one tree for Mother Earth, one tree for our future. Project One Tree, a News 18 network initiative.
On the show today, the T20 World Cup Bangladesh moved across to the West Indies. What can we expect from this?
Hello, I'm Alison Green, coming to you from Durban, South Africa. Today we have a special show.
We'll start with a report on India's shifting nuclear posture. The first time since India officially became a nuclear power.
Hello and welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Aaron Ham, coming to you live from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C.